Welcome to Voices of the Code. My name is Karl Murray, and this is Stephen Fox, whose voice is not doing super great today, so I'm going to do a lot of the talking for him. And today we have a special guest of Bogdan Kharchenko. And yes, I did ask him several times how to pronounce that, just to make sure I got it right. Bogdan, you want to go ahead and say hello for us?
Yeah, hey, how you guys doing? I'm so happy to be here with you guys and have a cool conversation. I like the premise of this podcast, so totally psyched to get going.
Okay,
Cool.
so
Thank you.
we do have a disclaimer for this episode, don't we, Stephen?
We do. What's that?
The disclaimer for this episode is that Bogdan bought the domain for Laravel, which is the project that Stephen and I are working on. That sort of
working in loose quotes.
in loose quotes. Okay, so we do kind of have to answer a question. So we did take a couple of weeks off from this, and we are definitely going to miss our deadline for Laravel. Because a lot of things has happened the last couple of weeks. One, Stephen went on vacation. How dare you go on vacation, sir?
I'm just crazy. I can't believe I did that.
Right. The audacity of going on vacation, spending time with your family, and not hang out with Karl on a podcast. But I also had the audacity to get a new job. So
congratulations!
Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you, Bogdan. So I am now a official title, solutions engineer at Lumenfire, which is a consultant agency, kind of like Titan Co. and Kirschbaum and that kind of stuff. They are heavily FileMaker Pro based, and they used to do a lot more WordPress, but we're starting to head more in the Laravel community, which is pretty awesome. Why they hired several Laravel devs, not that they don't have a good team of Laravel devs already. But yeah, that's kind of why the podcast has been temporarily put on hold. But we are back with Bogdan Kharchenko.
We are back.
I also think those are really good reasons. Vacation and a new job, I think that's worthwhile. Take a little bit of time off. So,
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Bogdan, the most important question that everybody here is going to want to know: what got you into coding and why Laravel?
yeah. I can take you back several years. And basically, this all started out, I came to America from Ukraine in 1997, and we came from like a fairly poor family and community, and my parents ended up buying us a computer at the eve of 1999. So there was like this Y2K crisis, and my parents went out to Walmart and they bought us like a E-Machines computer, and
Nice.
I had like a CD-ROM, floppy drive, the 56K modem. It was
Dinosaur.
yeah. So it was the first introduction to a computer, and when we first got it, there was this internet relay client. Maybe you guys know it as IRC.
IRC?
Yes. And it was a Windows computer, and there was a client called MIRC or MIRC. I don't know what's it called officially, but in this internet, relay chat client, there was a scripting mechanism where you could build like different tools or plugins within this a web app or a desktop app. I'm sorry. And so I really got into it. I was like, "Whoa, this is really cool!" And I was probably, I don't know, fairly young. I don't remember how old, but probably a year into it, I started making like some pretty interesting like plugins for this application. And it was I don't know, for me it was like my first like programming introduction, and I made a couple of these plugins, and I was like, well, I want to have like a website where I can put these plugins out in the wild. And this kind of brings me to how I got started with PHP to begin with. Somebody was like, dude, you should go just check it out. Like on one of these chats, he was like, you should go check out PHP. And I think PHP was like either version 3 or 4. Honestly, I don't remember. It was like a very long time ago. And, it kind of had that same feel of easy to get going. You don't have to like compile code. And It had a similar programming pattern as like this MARC or MIRC application. So it really hit home for me. So that was kind of how I started with that. And since then, I have worked on various small projects using PHP, and I did take a little bit of a brief period of non-programming for maybe like 8 years. And I picked up programming again in like maybe 2010 or so. And I kind of went back to the PHP world. I've done a bunch of WordPress stuff. I've done CodeIgniter stuff. And I had like a little side business. I had this website called mywebsiterepair.com, and the whole thing was just
Love the
about,
domain.
yeah, it
That
was
is
just like
awesome.
amazing SEO juice, and the whole
Oh,
premise was just like we fix broken WordPress websites, and a lot of people had a lot of WordPress websites. I think this was still like on the cusp of Wix and Squarespace not being out yet, so people were still self-hosting, and so I was doing a lot of that type of work. And my full-time job, which may be surprising for some, I used to be a paramedic for a long time. This is the reason for my brief disconnect from the programming world. But once I got back into programming, I kind of got the itch, and I kind of realized that, like, this is really what I love to do. And this is how, I ended up, getting out of that and doing programming full time. So that's kind of like the origin story.
That is
okay.
awesome.
Now let's go end game. What got you into Laravel specifically?
Yeah. So I was kind of in a bit of a research mode back in like 2000, I want to say 14. And I saw that Laravel was like a thing on the market. And one of the things that really drew me were the documentations. I was just like, well, this is amazing. It's like well written, and one day at that point I was already doing like a bunch of CodeIgniter work, and at that point in time I was like, well, let me just see how this works. And I was able to quickly build a very robust application, which followed like the really good Laravel conventions by generating a bunch of controllers automatically and models and all these things that to me it was just like the speed of development got me super excited about Laravel. And then I shelved it for maybe about 6 months or so, and I came up to I had a client that wanted to have a project built, and I was like, well, let me take a look into Laravel again. At this point, it was already Laravel 5.0. And I started building this application and basically never looked back. It's kind of been the only thing that I'm interested in terms of working with. And not only because it's great for developer experience. I think there's a lot of benefits for say like if you run an application like a real application. I think it gives you a lot of confidence in terms of like its actual ability to deliver every single time.
Yeah. Full featured application.
Yes, correct. Yeah, and like just to go into that a little bit, I ended up building a SaaS application very early on in the Laravel time, when I started. And this was like a pretty like reliability intensive application where it's still out there, but basically an employee would have to come in, clock out. There was like these very critical, even though they seem very basic, but they're critical infrastructure things that needed to work. And I just remember, deploying it on Forge using Vapor for zero-time deployment. Envoyer. And, there was a lot of like peace of mind when I went to sleep that I didn't have to wake up in the morning to like a huge disaster. And even though those things happened, mostly because of my errors that I've made or introduced. But I think like overall, just everything being so crystal clear of how the application works. Not only for me, but I remember also sitting down with my client, and he was like a business guy. And he was like, well, can you just kind of show me how this works? And I just legit opened up PHP Storm, and I was like, here's the route, here's the controller, here's this, a query that's being made with a ORM, and it's very readable, not just for developers, but also for the business people. And they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. This is the way it works. So, that kind of all sealed the deal, and I never looked back.
Awesome. Are we using, like, what stack are we using with Laravel? Is it all tall? Is it Blade? What are we using?
Yeah, so I've been sticking to Blade and full page refreshes as like the de facto thing. Right around where when in that period of time when I started using Laravel, there's been a bunch of like JavaScript frameworks coming out, and it was like Angular people were using, and then people were using Vue, people were using React in the early days, and ended up getting on a project where we had like a Vue front end and a Laravel backend, and it just took us so long to actually deliver features because we would have to write code in effectively two different languages, and it made everything from like testing to just managing, compiling, and it was just not a good experience. So, I try as much as possible not to use any like SPA type of application, even though things have gotten better, especially if you use something like Inertia or Livewire nowadays. Those things are like very performant, and they jive really well with each other. But yeah, certainly full page refreshes, just basic Vue, basic Blade components, and peppered in some JavaScript when needed, maybe Alpine.js, jQuery. I know it's not super popular, but it does the job.
Hey, jQuery is making a comeback.
Is it?
It's making a comeback. They just released like version 4 like a couple months ago.
Really?
If I remember correctly. I was like, this is insane. Like,
yeah, so there's been like a lot of pushback for some reason on jQuery. And the argument's like, well, you don't need jQuery, you could just write this plain JavaScript code. But then, if you really step back and think about it, the whole benefit of jQuery is that you don't have to do all of this like complicated, document, get element by ID stuff, like there's a nice shortcut. And I think, it's sometimes a little heavy in terms of the package size, but I think like it's much faster to write jQuery code than do like plain JavaScript. It's not that great. And jQuery supports, I don't know how much of an issue it is now, but cross-browser JavaScript compatibility, which used to be a big thing back in the day.
I misspoke. It's jQuery 4.0 beta was released February 6th, 24.
Okay.
So it's still in beta, but it is dropping support for IE 11. So
excellent. About time.
Out of curiosity, Bogdan, have you tried like sprinkling in just Alpine.js when you would normally reach for jQuery?
Yeah, so Alpine.js is basically the jQuery,
the
modern world. Yeah. And it does work great. And I say this not to compare one versus the other. I think like ultimately, and this kind of comes back to some of my like basic principles is like, we as developers a lot of times like fixate on like, well, I want to use like React because it does all these things, and I want to use Vue.js, or I want to use this and that. I just think that like there's nothing wrong with using jQuery if it does the job. There's nothing wrong with using Alpine.js if it does the job. Alpine.js does not do the same thing React would do. They obviously have to pick the right tool for the job. So I just think a lot of people get stuck on that, like, oh, I need to have a really successful application, I need to use React. Well, that's not true. You could just use Blade with some jQuery, plain JavaScript, Alpine.js, like you name it. The most important thing is to actually do some work. And
developer experience matters too, like 100%. So to be fair, and I wholly agree with you, Bogdan. But yeah, developer experience matters too.
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
so, and that was one of the things that I've always struggled with is the amount of people that are like, oh, we have to use React. Do we really have to use React? Is there another solution that might be better for us? Or are we just sticking with React because we can hire 10,000 college graduates in 5 minutes because of everybody knowing React now?
Right.
I think that's one of the things I really liked about Laravel was the fact that it's like, oh, it's not being taught in schools, so you're not getting that vibe of you have to use it because everybody uses it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, Bogdan, and so what do you do now?
Yeah, so right now I work for a company called Internachi. I work with a gentleman named Chris Morell and Skylar Katz. I'm sure you guys remember them. They've been mentioned at the Verbs presentation at Laracon. So they're heavily involved in a lot of this event sourcing stuff. But we work together at a company called Internachi, and we're basically a member association for home inspectors. And we utilize Laravel pretty heavily in our day-to-day.
Okay. Tell me a little bit, or what you can about that stack. Tell me some interesting things that you've got using that stack specifically.
Sure. Yeah. Everything basically that I mentioned so far is exactly what we're doing. When I first joined the team, we were kind of, I joined the team 6 years ago. We were kind of in the same position of, well, do we go with like a front end stack and like a SPA and Laravel on the back end, or do we use Blade? And because none of us in the company had like really solid experience using React, and we didn't have the financial backing to hire a bunch of React developers, we just basically said, let's do basic Blade templates, full page refreshes. And, that gave us, all the benefits that I mentioned, everything from testing and just, not having to deal with another programming language to maintain.
Right.
Sounds good.
It's a fairly old application, right? Internachi's been around for a while.
Yeah, so Internachi itself has been around for over 20 years. There's some legacy code that is still around, but it's all mostly migrated into a Laravel app. And I believe, I think there's maybe 500,000 lines of code in this Laravel application. So it's a pretty big application.
Were you around when it was doing that migration from kind of old school PHP to Laravel?
Yes. So when I joined Internachi, Chris Morell has already started doing some of that work, and he's moved some of like the basic components. But over the last 6 years, we've been moving various components over, and a lot of people ask me like, what do you do on like your day-to-day, like non-programmer guys? And, I tell them, I'm like, imagine that we have a highway, like an interstate, and we have to basically move traffic without causing delay, and this is kind of what we've been doing with some of this, like, legacy code is, we do have an active user base that is using all these features. And how do you, move code and, make sure that it continues to work in terms of like the data model and structure. And you also want to like improve it, right? So, it's definitely been a challenge to, to do that without causing a lot of headache or data loss. So we have been doing it, time by time. And it's been going great. I think ultimately though, I think if we were to start from scratch with like a brand new application, you could probably move a lot faster because you don't have like some of that older code base to worry about because there isn't that much, let's say, testing and documentation of how things work. So a lot of times you'd have to go and explore, figure out what it does, and then you can move it. So, but it's a good challenge. I think we're almost there. There's a few more components that need to come over, but I think we're at the end of the tunnel pretty soon.
Can you get into any specifics and like how you guys are actually doing that?
Sure.
Like whenever you say like, okay, we've got, I don't know, whatever, this feature or something, and it's like, well, it's currently in legacy.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like. How do you actually do that?
Sure. So I'll give you an example. So we have a mechanism. We have basically a cron job in this old system that runs every so often, and it calls a PHP file, which gathers a number of records from the database, and then effectively there's corresponding files that it would call. So they're kind of like little file handlers, you would say, right? Or little jobs. So we have been traditionally in this legacy system calling this file with a cron job, dispatching maybe 5 or 10 of these quote unquote jobs. And, they did various things, send emails, make an attachment, and so on and so forth. And, we wanted to bring that over into our new system. And, we sat down with Chris and Skylar, and we kind of brainstormed how to do that. And what we ended up coming up with, which I think was a pretty good solution, was we would move these individual handlers into Laravel one by one while keeping that original like cron job file that dispatched all these things. And we would move that piece of code over, and we would say, instead of sending that email from host O, we would just say, write a record to a table in our database that signifies what to do to Laravel. And then in Laravel, we created a job that runs every minute that checks that table to see if we need to like process a queue from our old system. And we took, the data and, knowing what data is in that queue job and which file we need to call in Laravel, we effectively, sent a signal to Laravel to process something from the legacy system. So that has been working out really well. And, we also used it for other aspects of the system. So, for example, we have a course platform. And at the end of this platform, when you complete this course, we would send you an email. And rather than like sending it from the legacy system, we just queued that job into this system and said, hey, send this email when you're ready. So, we now taken over control of sending an email from an old system through Laravel, which has been really nice. So that's one of the ways to do it. And, there's other tricks that we're doing, not just in this process, but in general, having to deal with proxy servers and so on and so forth, because, we have to like split traffic between two different servers in real time.
That sounds complicated.
Yeah,
like
luckily...
the queue side, I am kind of wrapping my head around, and that makes sense. You guys almost made your own queue stack, right?
Yes.
It's like SQS, homegrown. But man, how do you handle web traffic where it's like, well, this route is on old system and this other route is now on the new one?
Yeah, luckily, I don't have to deal too much with the DevOps stuff. And Chris Morrell has been kind of like owning that job ever since before I even got there. But it's effectively a proxy server that, sits in front of the main domain. And, all the requests kind of go through it. And we're able to, based on, route patterns, direct traffic to different servers. So, yeah,
cool.
It's challenging. Older code bases are challenging. It's not as easy as like, let's spin up a Forge server and everything just works.
Right. So what tools do you use, Bogdan? Are we using VS Code, PHP Storm?
Yeah, so I'm certainly a PHP Storm a fan, and it has been prior to PHP Storm, I've used like various tools like NetBeans. I don't know if you guys remember. I don't know if you guys are that old.
NetBeans mentioned. Back in my Java days, I used NetBeans a lot.
Yeah. So ever since I got a hold of PHP Storm, I've been basically using it nonstop. And when the VS Code came out, a lot of people were like super excited about it. And I know a lot of people use it day to day, but I've given it a few chances, but it just doesn't have like the same abilities as PHP Storm does. Especially when
So
you
I'm gonna
combine it with like the Laravel IDEA plugin. To work with Laravel has never been easier. I know that Laravel is also deploying a plugin for VS Code, but um, it has certainly like improved my developer experience, and everybody on our team uses the same configuration, so it's the same tool. So it's really nice to work with somebody that uses the same tool, and you can basically help each other.
press this keyboard shortcut
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of
and it'll
times it's
just work.
like, we'll be doing some pairing sessions, and I'm gonna go into detail. I'll be doing some complicated thing that there's a shortcut for, and they're like, oh yeah, there's this shortcut. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. But yeah.
Are you guys mostly remote?
Yes, we are 100%
Okay.
remote. Yep.
So what does a pairing session look like for you guys? You open Zoom, Slack, are we Tuple? What are we
Yeah,
using?
so we use Tuple, but we also pair on Zoom if it's pretty quick. We're just kind of showing some code, but yeah, usually it's one person driving and maybe two of us just kind of pitching in some ideas. Or not just writing code, but we're also like when I mentioned we look at some of the legacy code. Um, Oftentimes it's better for us to look at it together as a team to figure out what's going on.
You need one person typing, one person thinking, and one person translating.
Yeah, yes, for sure. So, we do use it extensively, and code reviews and a bunch of other tools. I think Tuple overall just has like the best quality for screen sharing, and it's been working out great for us.
So I'm expecting a sponsorship deal from Tuple pretty soon.
Yeah, I should reach out to them. I reached out to JetBrains, and they ended up sponsoring a meetup that I host in Greenville, South Carolina. And they gave us a bunch of, well, not a bunch, but they give us a handful of free licenses to give away to our attendees, which has been super nice. So maybe it's a good idea. Maybe I'll reach out to Tuple. Maybe they'll give us a month free or 2 month free license for a team or something.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is fun.
Yeah.
So you use dark mode, light mode?
So I used to do dark mode many years ago, but I think my eyes have taken a toll on it, and all I do is do light mode. I just think there's some benefits to it in regard to so we use GitHub or I use GitHub for code storage, and if you have the same like theme in your IDE as the GitHub theme, it makes like code review pretty quick, or you don't have to like shift, themes. So that's the theme that I use is like a GitHub IDE theme, and it's in light mode. Even my GitHub is set to light mode only, so I don't do dark mode.
So if you ever do any pair programming with Steven, he will put sunglasses on immediately. Just letting you know now.
This is why Bogdan is tan and I am pale.
Yeah,
Yes.
the light of the monitor.
Yes,
That makes sense.
for sure.
Hey, you just kind of like glanced over something there I feel like we could touch on for a minute. So do you want to talk at all about the meetup you do with Upstate?
Sure. Yeah, so so I'm fairly new to the Greenville area, and I moved here for about 2.5 years ago, and everybody is still kind of like recovering from COVID and trying to get their bearings set. And I went to a local meetup. We have this organization in Greenville called hackgreenville.com. By the way, if you're in South Carolina, North Carolina, or the surrounding areas, check them out. But I went there, and there was like a lot of momentum of people trying to get out and know each other. And I think people have just kind of missed that because of COVID. And so that was a bit of an inspiration. And then sometime later, I went to the Nashville Laracon conference, and after the Laracon conference, I got super pumped because we saw a bunch of people in person. And I kind of in the back of my mind I wanted to do some sort of local meetup, and luckily I found the the person who ran the PHP meetup in Greenville. It's called Upstate PHP, and he was just kind of like, if you want to restart it, go ahead. So earlier this year, after taking 4-year hiatus from the meetup, from the Upstate PHP meetup, we did our first event. We had 5 people show up, and we just had pizza, got to know each other, and it was a really good time. And what I got from that was that people, kind of like my hypothesis was, people really did want to get out and see each other, shake somebody's hand, and get to know their story. So, we've since then hosted 2 additional meetups, which have been both successful. We've had Daniel Colburn come out from Asheville to talk about verbs. We recently had Alex Six do a talk about filament, which I know he was on your podcast. So we're able to attract some talent, and we're getting anywhere from 20 to 30 people to come to this event, and it's been great. I love that people are able to find each other. I was talking to a gentleman at one of the meetups, and he was mentioning that there's potentially a job opportunity from one of the other attendees. So to me, it was just like, wow, like what more can you get? Not only are you learning, you're getting to meet people that could potentially give you a job, or potentially be your business partner. And I think in person still has a lot of value. I know that everybody's remote, but because everybody's remote, I think there's a void to fill. So, we are happy to do it, to bring people together. But yeah, so that's upstatephp.com. If you guys are in the area, definitely check it out. We meet on a quarterly basis. I think the next meetup will be in January. So stay tuned.
Yeah, highly recommend. Highly recommend. It was, I made it to the one with Daniel, and if you're even not in the area, like come into town.
Fly
Greenville,
buy
for
tickets.
starters. Yeah, Greenville is a really, really cool city. It has like this awesome, good downtown experience, but it's not overwhelmingly big. And that was really nice. And then 2, I got so many valuable relationships because the size was like perfect. There's enough people that it didn't feel like awkwardly intimate with complete strangers. And yet at the same time, it wasn't Laracon sized. Mm-hmm. And so if you want, you can have a meaningful conversation with pretty much everybody else in the room. And it was just super great. It was super awesome. So
yeah,
highly recommend.
It was a fantastic experience. Thank you for that feedback. It's especially that one time we had a lot of people come down. We had like Eric Barnes, Jason Beggs, obviously you were there, and we had Chris Morrell. We had
Joel
Claremont.
Yeah, it was just like lots of people.
It was a lot of people, awesome. And it was a really good time. And we don't want it to be like a big size. We want it to be approachable, like you said. It's somewhere where you can actually get to know somebody. In contrast to Laracon, at Laracon this past year, I felt so exhausted. Like my dopamine levels were drained for like a week, maybe 2, just from having conversations with various people. And it's a great event, but it's really hard to actually have like a meaningful one-on-one long-term conversation.
You've got like 5 seconds between one conversation to the next one.
Yeah.
Bogdan, you were one of the few people I actually got a chance to meet at Laracon. So we did this whole Telegram chat thing where I was like, actually like, hey, I'm over here in a red jacket, blue backpack. Yes. If you need me, I'm here. And Bogdan was one of the guys who was like, raised his hand. He was like, hey, I'll meet you over by Terminal Coffee. I'll see you there in like 5 minutes. I'm like, all right, deal. 5 minutes. I'll see you there. So that was awesome. That was kind of cool. What was your big key takeaway? And don't say Laravel Cloud. Everybody says Laravel Cloud from Laracon this year.
I think in general, like, this is my, 4th Laracon, I believe I'm at. And, I think the, not in any particular product, but I think just overall, the community is just as strong as it was, I think my first Laracon was in 2018. And, that shows, that the community is still kind of sticking together. There's really good vibes. Like I had a really good time. There, I don't know, I haven't seen any like drama. It was like a really good experience. And as far as the talks, I was really impressed by the Laravel Reverb demo with them flying the drone. I thought that was like super wild. Because I always had like my doubts, like, oh, like can Reverb actually like scale? And then, once you see how many data transmissions it does for that drone video shot, like it's remarkable. So that's
That
definitely.
that was a pretty cool video. If you were at Laracon and you were in the Telegram group, it was really funny because he just walks outside, casually drops a box in the middle of the stage, and the Telegram chat just blew up with 100 people going, "What's in the box? What's in the box?" Which I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, that was one of my favorite talks as well. Yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite ones. Okay, so what's your favorite tip? Like, we're gonna start wrapping this up pretty quickly.
Sure.
So, like, a new Laravel developer, what's your big thing that was like life changing for you getting into Laravel?
Um, so I guess I can give like a more general tip for developers and then maybe a Laravel tip specifically. I feel like early on I think there was a podcast with Taylor, and in this podcast he said something that kind of opened up my eyes, and this is not just like a Laravel thing, but and one of the things he said is a lot of people like focus on like over optimizing their application and like scaling it to like some infinite number, like they're going to be the next Facebook. And the reality, that's not going to be the case. This is why I say, like, if you need to use jQuery, use jQuery, right? If that's what you love, just focus on actually delivering value to your customer, whether that's, a client using your SaaS app or, a customer that is paying you for a small project, rather than like over engineering, like, oh, like what if I have like a million records in this table? Like, that this is going to be a 5-page application managed in Filament. Like, there's not going to be a million pages, like, don't over engineer it, just go and actually do it. And, if you need to deploy it on Laravel Forge on a $5 VPS machine, that's probably going to suffice 99.99% of the applications out there. Like, you don't need Laravel Vapor. You don't need a expensive Amazon EC2 instance with its own standalone RDS database. Like, don't overcomplicate it. Just build everything on one machine, and then hopefully your app will grow, and you will consider some of these things painful at that time. But like at that point in time, you will actually it will be worthwhile to do that investment rather than like gold plating your entire application at the very beginning only for it to fail. So I think that's like one thing that really stuck to me, and I think a lot of people spend too much time gold plating their systems, which is great if you want to like practice, but if you actually want to deliver value, you got to ship it quickly. So that's one thing. As far as like Laravel tips, I think like the most like meaningful thing to I think embrace, and I know that there's a lot of or used to be a lot of pushback against the ORM of Laravel, and everybody be like, "Oh, ORMs make your application so slow. You gotta write these like native you gotta write these SQL queries from scratch and do all this stuff." But I think like once you figure out how the ORM works, how the relationships are structured. I think that's like the key part, because once you do that, you can build, quickly. You can figure out how to really create tables that you need and not have to do like some sort of crazy joins. I don't know. I think the ORM is probably the best part of Laravel. Managing manual SQL queries is incredibly painful, and there's all types of security risks and so on and so forth, but just using the ORM provides a lot of value. So I think mastering that is probably the number one tip.
Did you take the Laracast course on mastering Eloquent?
I did not. I used to watch Laracast many years ago, and I for some reason just stopped. And I just, I think like I remember, I will say, like when I first got into Laravel, I got into Laracast. I would like go to sleep listening to Jeffrey Way like talk about
Yeah.
controllers and stuff. And maybe I did watch this video if it's an old video, but
It's Jonathan Rennick did the course
oh,
on
okay.
like
Yeah.
performance driven eloquent or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but yeah, it was a pretty fantastic course. If you haven't already seen it, I would highly recommend it. Even if you already have a very vast understanding of eloquent, just because Taylor has joked about the only person that knows eloquent better than Taylor is Jonathan Rennick.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I know that there's a lot of tips and tricks, and I remember Jonathan Rennick came up. I want to say he was at a Laracon, and he showed a cool demo on how to like optimize some queries that would otherwise take a little while to do. So I think there's obviously a lot of very advanced eloquent that people do need to know, but I think just understanding the basics is like especially for a newcomer, right? Like
get you there 95% of the
yeah,
time.
like 95% of the time, you will get there, and yeah.
Yeah, that's the really good part to me about Jonathan's course when I went through it is, to me, he did a great job of covering performant and tips and tricks of databases first, and then how you accomplish that with Eloquent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually less like advanced Eloquent to me. It's more of like advanced database querying with Eloquent. And that was like a pretty big differentiator, because a lot of the things that you learn in there just conceptually apply to multiple database engines. And the ORM is just a way to interact with building queries and stuff like that. And so it pays dividends well beyond just Eloquent.
Yeah, I'll have to definitely check it out. It sounds like worthwhile course.
All right. And I'll ask the last question that we love asking. Outside of writing code, what does Bogdan like to do?
Do you like fountain pens?
No, I do not like fountain pens. So, I like to live on the edge in life, I guess. But I used to race motorcycles in my early 20s, and I still have a huge passion for it. And I don't race anymore, but I occasionally go to the racetrack just for like practice. I also have a street bike that I just picked up this year, and I just came back from this past weekend. I was at the Tail of the Dragon in Tennessee and North Carolina, if you guys know where that is. And that was an amazing road. We went out with some guys there. Beautiful turns and scenery and everything like that. So, but yeah, so I do that, and aside from that, I also do mountain biking, which is another extreme sport. I do skiing, which is another extreme sport, and I've done scuba diving once, which was super cool. But I haven't done it since. I do really want to pick it up again. I just haven't found the time between all the other extreme stuff I do. So yes, I like to get out. As much as I like writing code, I also don't want to be in front of a computer my entire life. I want to get out. I was in Europe a couple of years ago, and my kind of like general observation was there's the people that go there are like either pretty young that don't have kids, or like very old that don't have kids, right? And in between that period of time, I think like you need to enjoy life a little bit, because when I was like pretty young and I didn't have kids, I also didn't have money, and I don't want to be old without kids and unable to do some of these things in life. So I'm trying to enjoy it a little bit, to some degree.
totally. Track riding motorcycles is one of the
Yes, I know,
things that
Steven, you're into.
yeah,
Or
Bogdan and I hit it off quickly because
yes,
there's not many developers that you could be like, yo, you dropped me at the track, and,
yeah.
and Bogdan was one of them.
Yeah,
So
I honestly think you'd be surprised. Like, I was surprised that like DHH was racing cars and not just
yeah,
like at a local track event or a small organization, but like at Le Mans. And that,
yeah,
and I'm sure he did a bunch of stuff. But I think you know, you just I don't know. There needs to be I think a channel or something that like, are you into extreme sports? For developers, because I often find that like the guys that I ride mountain bikes with, they also do skiing, and then some of the guys that I ride motorcycle with, they do some other extreme sports. So I think like once you're in there, you're in that extreme category. So I think there needs to be extreme sports club for programmers.
yeah. Adrenaline seeking
Yes.
coders. I like it.
Yes.
New
Performance.
podcast. I hear coming to light right now.
Yes.
Yeah, because Steven needs a fourth podcast.
Like all of my week now. Oh
Yeah.
man.
Steven's available every day for another podcast.
That's awesome.
Never ending recording.
Right. Are you into like custom keyboards or what?
No, I have a Logitech keyboard that's like the ergonomic keyboard. It's slightly, curved. And it's been working great. I think one of the reasons why I actually dislike those keyboard, mechanical keyboards is like the amount of noise they make just drives me crazy. Like I just don't want to sit in front of a typewriter all day. And
Okay, so Steven, we need to get in a room with Bogdan. We need to show him how to build a keyboard that doesn't sound
there's a way. I
astronomically
see.
loud. Yeah. Bogdan, I'm not kidding. I have parts behind me for keyboards.
I see.
Like,
So you can
just
actually build one. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually buy foam and stuff like that to fill all the cavities in my keyboard so that they aren't.
Oh, I see.
Loud
So
and
they
annoying
don't
like
make
that.
clacky noise. Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with that. I just think like to me, I never got into it. I know some people are super into keyboards. There was a gentleman, I want to say his name was Austin, at Laravel, and he was like giving away these like custom keys that he created, and oh, you have one. Oh, there it is, beautiful. Yeah, so he was giving them away, and I was like, well, I kind of want one, but I don't have a keyboard to even. I'm gonna waste it. So he gave me a defective one, which I do have, but it wouldn't fit into any keyboard. But yeah, I think there's a little subculture, in that space, and it's huge. It's like the NeoVim guys doing their extreme programming, and
every episode somebody mentions NeoVim.
Yeah.
It's gotta get mentioned.
I'll let it up to those guys. Yeah, I don't know if I have the patience to like sit and like map the keys on my keyboard and like some text file and like upload the firmware and do all that work. It just seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, you don't have to go that crazy. You can get a standard keyboard that works the way you expect it to without changing anything. But you can still get that mechanical feel where you have a great typing experience without it being astronomically loud and annoying.
Sure.
Keychron's being my favorite as far as like you can get a standard model that doesn't change a whole lot. The one I am using on my gaming computer is actually like the K10 or Q10 or something. I don't, but it's an Alice layout. So you have a nice ergonomical layout, but it's an aluminum brick. My wife picked it up the other day and she was like, yeah, this is like the zombie apocalypse weapon. So if someone breaks into the house, you're just going to clock them with this keyboard, right?
Yeah, send that to me. Send me a link afterwards. I'll definitely check it out. I can't say I'm going to buy it, but at least I want to take a look at this aluminum beast. Kind of interested.
It's pretty crazy.
Okay.
But yeah, it's pretty cool.
I would say the step up going from a standard layout to something where you have thumb clusters.
Thumb clusters was a life changer for me.
Yeah, it's way more important than going from like a butterfly switch to a mechanical switch. Thumb clusters, these are like one of your most valuable assets on your hands, and for it to only strike a single key times 2 fingers is a little bit of a waste. So as soon as you get thumb clusters, it opens up a whole new world.
Yeah, I did see it. Chris Morrell does have one of those like moonwalkers or something, and I was at his house one day and he was just showing me like, if you press this, it changes this whole layout. I was like, dude, like this is some 3D level keyboard stuff right here. So I'm just like used to capital letters and lowercase letters and stuff, and that that does like the work. So, but kudos to you guys for doing all that keyboard stuff. It's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. I'm not on Steven's level. Like, he sent me his firmware the other day and he was like, check this out. I'm like, yeah, nope, I'm never going to figure this one out. Sorry, Steven.
It's one of those things that, like, I've now been doing it for, I think, 2 years with this setup. And so it becomes a second nature, as like remembering that, to go from a lowercase s to a capital S, you hold shift. Well, right. Whenever I want to do a custom like key command for PHP Storm or some other application, I can just hold my thumb down and tap it, and it just happens to represent something else. Yeah. And you can just get a little bit more efficient with that. So
yeah, that's pretty cool.
The Q8 that I'm going to send you a link to does actually have 2 buttons in the middle next to the keyboard, next to the spacebar. Okay. And so you can program those to be whatever you want.
I see. Okay. Sounds good.
So are you using a Mac or PC or Linux?
Mac.
What are we using?
Mac.
Okay, so you could actually program those to be command keys on the middle one on your right hand, and then a control key on the left side if you want. And that ends up being a really, really, really cool, simple change that doesn't require months of free programming your brain to figure out.
Okay, sounds good.
It's not like the ZSH keyboards that Steven and I use, where it takes you like 2 weeks to figure out how to type on it properly.
See, this is why I don't want to get into this space, because I know that like once you get into it, you're like, well, I set this up in one day, and then you get some other keyboard that takes like 2 weeks to configure.
Yeah, it's a gateway drug.
Yes,
it 100% is.
Yeah.
All right, Bogdan. Well, it's been awesome getting to meet you. It was awesome getting to meet you in person and talking to you in Telegram and all that kind of stuff. Love having you on the show. Next week, if Steven is available, I think I am. I think we're going to do Leah Thompson, who recently got into Laravel, like in the last year or two. So she should be a fun one to get to know and see how she's doing with that. So yeah, we'll see you next week, guys.
Absolutely. Can I do a couple of really quick name drops as we sign off here? And we'll also put some links in the show notes. But yeah, Bogdan, where can people find out more about the meetup first?
So the best way to find out information about our meetup is upstatephp.com. We also have a Twitter account, or formerly known as Twitter, X, also upstatephp. And you can sign up to our newsletter, and we can give you a shout out next time we're going to have an event. Also, if you are interested in speaking at our event, feel free to find us on the website and just reach out to us, because we are interested in getting interesting conversations going. So if you want to get in and have a place or a platform, feel free to reach out.
Great. And then other one I wanted to mention, Chris is an awesome guy, and it's impossible that you would listen to this podcast and not know about his, but he does do over-engineered.
Yes.
So if you like this type of kind of technical Laravel coding stuff, go check out Chris's podcast as well. Okay, that's it for me, Karl. You can sign us off.
And we're out. No. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
All right. See ya.
See ya.